Go inside the Crimson Tide with your hosts Rodney Orr and Gary Harris, keeping you informed on everything Alabama. Tider Insider TV, brought to you by Visit Tuscaloosa.
And hello again, everybody, and welcome into the latest edition of Tider Insider Television, presented by Visit Tuscaloosa. I'm Gary Harris. Now, my co-host, Rodney Orr, is going to be joining us. But as you know, if you live here in West Alabama, really anywhere in Alabama, maybe around the country if you're watching us on the app or the stream, there's a lot of flu and colds going around. Rodney has been under the weather, so he is not in studio tonight, so I'm solo, but we are going to have him with us, and he is going to break down the game just like he normally would if he was sitting right here. But you've just got yours truly tonight in the studio. All right, we're going to begin, of course, with the Rose Bowl. We're 2 days away from the big game in Pasadena, the quarterfinal between Alabama and top-ranked Indiana, quarterfinal in the college football playoff. Alabama, the 9th seed, Indiana, as I said, number 1 seed. Both teams arrived in Southern California last night. Now, the Rose Bowl has traditionally, for many, many years, pitted the Big Ten and Pac-12 champions. But when the BCS came along and later the college football playoff, that has changed. And this is interesting to note. Of course, you know Indiana is one of the losingest programs of all time. Alabama is one of the winningest programs. Even though Indiana is in the Big Ten, this will only be their second Rose Bowl appearance ever. It'll be Alabama's 9th. Going back to their first appearance 100 years ago in the 1926 Rose Bowl when Alabama stunned, then almost, we thought, if you lived in that era, unbeatable Washington 20-19 to win the Crimson Tide's first national championship in 1925 under Wallace Wade. Now, Indiana is currently listed as a 7-point favorite. Now, if you'd have said that even before the season, but much less a couple of years ago, people would have thought you were crazy. That Indiana would be in the Rose Bowl and be a 7-point favorite over Alabama. Are you kidding me? But that's where we're at now in college football. Indiana's 13-0, Big Ten champion, won at Oregon, beat Ohio State. Alabama's a really good team. We know that. Alabama's beaten Georgia. They've beaten Vanderbilt. They've beaten Tennessee. They beat Oklahoma in the first round of the college football playoff in Norman. So Alabama is a really good team, but Indiana's the favorite for good reason. They're plus 17 in turnover margin. They have turned it over just 7 times. And they have been consistent offensively. Fernando Mendoza is the Heisman Trophy winning quarterback. They've got a running game as well. They're balanced on offense. Defensively, they get after the quarterback. They're good on the back end defensively. Offensively, their receivers are top-notch. That's one reason Mendoza is the Heisman Trophy winner, as he has been throwing to some great, great wide receivers. So they are a solid football team. Alabama's opportunistic on defense. We know that. And if the Crimson Tide, which doesn't have a great running game, can get Ty Simpson cranked up, if they can run it well enough to get the play action going, we know defensively they're capable of making big plays. They had a pick six, Xavier Brown, his second pick six of the season against Oklahoma in that game in the first round of the college football playoffs. So turnovers could be huge. All right, let me bring in Rodney Orr. Rodney, good evening. How are you?
Hey, Gary. How are you?
Good to have you with us. Hate you can't be in studio, but we certainly understand. Rodney, is it too simplistic just to say that the key to this game for Alabama is just taking care of the football? We saw a perfect example. In Tuscaloosa against Oklahoma, Alabama dominated time of possession. They doubled up the Sooners in total yardage, but they had 3 turnovers. And they had errors in the kicking game, and they got beat. They go to Norman, even down 17-0. They don't turn it over. They force turnovers. They get a pick 6, and they win the game. Is that the biggest key for Alabama against Indiana?
Yeah, I think so, Gary. I mean, I was asked that earlier today on another show, on one of the radio shows I was on. That was my exact answer. I said, you can go back to November the 15th, and you can see where Alabama pretty much dominated the game. 3 turnovers gave them 17 points, and Alabama loses by 2. And then you go to Norman, and you see where Oklahoma jumps out to a 17-0 lead, and then, you know, they start making mistakes. They have turnovers. Alabama protects the ball, gets back in the game, wins the game, going away, actually. So turnovers is a really big key, especially when you're playing a team like Indiana that is so fundamentally sound, well-disciplined. As you mentioned, they're plus 17 in turnover margin. They don't make a lot of mistakes. So you certainly, in this case, Alabama, they need to be ahead of the game in the turnover margin in this game.
All right, you do a segment on my radio show every Monday, and we covered this yesterday morning. We're going to cover it again. Alabama's offense versus Indiana's defense. We know Indiana can really get after the quarterback. They're not the biggest defensive line, though. Physically, Alabama's a much bigger offensive line, but Alabama's been a zone run team this year, perimeter run team. They haven't really lined up and just tried to knock people off the ball. And I know you're not going to completely change your personality, but don't you think if they could get a downhill running game, then they could work Ty Simpson off play action, they would have a really good chance to be successful against this Indiana defense?
Yeah, I mean, I think that Alabama's going to have some opportunities to run the ball in this game. You know, I've talked to people who have scouted Indiana quite a bit, have extensively, and they think that Alabama can generate a run game against it, even though, listen, now Indiana only gives up 77 yards a game rushing. They're one of the top rush defenses in the country, but they feel like Alabama can run the football against this Indiana defense to some extent. And if they can generate some of that, they feel like, you know, Ty Simpson's going to have some opportunities. I know that Indiana really likes to play zone. There's some people that think, hey, you know what, Indiana isn't capable of manning up on these Alabama receivers, so they're going to have to play a lot of zone. And they do get after the quarterback, like you said. So it's going to be really important that Alabama protect Ty Simpson. It's going to have to be smart with the football, of course. But, Gary, Indiana has 39 sacks on the season. They're one of the top 5-10 pass rush teams in the country. So it's the offensive line has got to give Ty some protection as well.
And Indiana, as you said, they're excellent against the run as well. But they are without a couple of defensive linemen. One they lost after the Big Ten championship game. Their best pass rusher went down with a freak injury after the game. So they're not 100% on that defensive line. And for Alabama, Rodney, health-wise, this is the best Alabama's been since before the season. Everybody that's been out, other than the guys that are out for the season, and one of those is a suspended player, they're back for this game, Rod.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like that this is the healthiest that Alabama's been in quite some time, and I think even the Oklahoma game, you saw some kind of guys that they were much better condition than they had been a couple of weeks earlier in the game against Georgia. So, and a lot of the guys, some guys didn't obviously get to play against Georgia. So, yeah, this is an Alabama team that I think is probably at its healthiest in several weeks. And you mentioned Indiana, you know, being a little bit banged up on the defensive line. The one thing they do have, though, they have a lot of depth. Mm-hmm. They can move guys around, and they do a really good job on their defensive front.
All right, let's get to Alabama's defense against Indiana's offense. And we know what Indiana brings to the table. Balance. They can run it. They can throw it. Mendoza won the Heisman. Those receivers are, you know, like Alabama's. They're big time. He is a guy that Mendoza, and he's a pretty good athlete, but he's not a running quarterback. You let him stand back there in the pocket. I don't care how long you think you can hold up in coverage. If you don't get pressure on him, even if you've got 8 people in coverage playing zone, he'll find the holes. I think, and I want to see if you agree with me, I think Alabama may have to play some man-to-man in this game like they did against Oklahoma in the second half and bring some pressure. I know you can't just full-out blitz every time, but if you let him get comfortable, he's going to pick you apart, Rodney, in my opinion.
Yeah, and I think they can get pressure. I mean, if you watch, if you study Indiana and you watch them against some of the Big Ten opponents that they had, and I'm talking about with lesser people than what Alabama plays with on the outside, those teams had some success getting after him. Now, Mendoza's really good at beating pressure. There's no doubt about that. So he's really good at it. But I think Alabama, with the players that they have, they can have some success when you look at these matchups against this offensive line. I think Alabama can get to him, create some pressure. But, again, he's really heady now. He can get the ball out really quickly. They do a nice job with their pass game.
All right, before we get to coach talk, intangibles. You know, Alabama had issues in the kicking game at some points in the season, but they were great against Oklahoma. It was a big factor in them winning the game. Is it the kicking game? Is it coaching? Is there an intangible in this game that could swing the pendulum one way or the other, in your opinion?
How about the weather?
Okay, yeah, fair enough. Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, I don't know. I mean, listen, it depends on how much it's raining because, to me, Gary, if it starts to get kind of showers and that type of thing, let's go back to the Michigan game last year. I thought Alabama totally mishandled it when it started raining, when they had the showers. And, how are you going to respond? They didn't even have the right cleats last year, if you remember. They were flipping and sliding around.
I do.
So, I mean, I think, again, you have to be prepared for those kind of things. So, and again, the fact that Indiana runs the ball extremely well, and Alabama really hasn't shown the consistent ability to run the ball well, if it's wet, that may favor Indiana.
That is a good Intangible right there. All right, Rod, we'll have you rejoin us in just a moment. It's time now for Coach Talk. Alabama's offense came alive over the final 2.5 quarters against Oklahoma in the first round of the CFP playoff. Not including Xavier Brown's pick six, the Crimson Tide scored 27 points on offense, which matches the highest point total over the final month of the regular season. Alabama offensive coordinator Ryan Grubb says that part of the performance that he wants to see carry over to Thursday's game is just the fact that they were resilient.
They played so hard, and Ty was, I thought, at his all-time best, in my opinion, just the way he was, his resiliency on the sideline, his mindset, just the things he was saying in between series. There just was a belief that, if I was down there playing with Ty, I would have believed, we're going to get this done. So I think that unwavering belief and just the guys with a really, really tough start, obviously the football game, that they, knew they could move the football on these guys, had done it before, and just stuck to the plan.
And as I said, from an injury standpoint, Alabama looks to be as healthy as it's been all year. LT Overton is back on the defensive front. Kevin Riley is off the injury report, so Alabama's good there. Let me bring Rod back in for just a final thought before we hit the break. And that is, Rod, and you mentioned the weather, which I think is a great intangible. You know what mine is? It's disrespect. I think Alabama's playing the disrespect card. They're an underdog against a team that's one of the losingest programs, against one of the winningest programs of all time, Rod. I think Alabama's got a little bit of a chip on its shoulder.
That's when Alabama's really dangerous, I can tell you. And it does seem like when DeBoer's teams are kind of challenged in that way, Gary, they generally respond pretty well. So you're right. That could be a good intangible as well.
All right. Still to come on Tider Insider Television, Alabama basketball looks to take care of business without its leading scorer, LeBaron Philon, and more on the Rose Bowl quarterfinal showdown with Indiana. Find out what Alabama players are saying about the challenge of facing the top-ranked Hoosiers. That's coming up next, and we're going to have it for you. Plus, in just a little bit, we'll be getting your phone calls, emails, and tweets. As always, that phone number, 205-348-WVUA. That's 348-9882, area code 205. We'll be right back with the only show that takes you inside the Crimson Tide, the Rose Bowl edition of Tider Insider TV. We'll return after this timeout.
About the Bama mystique, how do you convince the players that you're playing this team, you're not playing all that tradition?
You probably know more about the mystique than they do. I mean, our guys just know what they see on tape.
And that Curt Cignetti now, he is straightforward, and he's probably right. I don't think Indiana's in awe of Alabama's tradition. At the same time, Alabama's history and tradition, I do think it matters in big games like this. We'll see on Thursday afternoon. Curt Cignetti, though, he understands he's got the #1 team in the country. He understands that they're really, really a good team. And Indiana has proven itself, as I said earlier, to be the real deal this season. Time and again, they've won games over teams that were expected to beat them all the way through this season, to go 13-0 and to be the Big Ten champions for the first time in 50 years or so. And they beat Ohio State to do it. They beat Oregon in Eugene. So they are a very capable team. As I said, statistically, they're one of the best teams in the country on both offense and defense. They're balanced on both sides of the football. They're solid in the kicking game, and they're going to be a big challenge. Speaking of the challenge, today in Pasadena, Alabama players met with the media ahead of the Rose Bowl, and they talked about the challenge of facing this Indiana team on both sides of the football.
Yeah, one, how disciplined they are. Literally, they rarely mess up. It's quite impressive. Two, how well they play together. Everybody does their job very, very well, and that's why they're very high on the defensive statistic of the ball. And then three, just how hard they play. Their guys are flying around. There's always one or two or three, four guys at the ball.
Man, I mean, he is the Heisman winner, so if you don't get pressure, man, he can make every throw. Smart, going to make the right read, so you have to affect him to be successful in this game.
He can make every throw. There's a throw, I think it was against Iowa. He was on the left hash, and he threw a whole shot across the field. I mean, it was probably 30 yards down the field, but across the field, so that's a very impressive throw for a quarterback to make. It's probably one of the hardest throws for a quarterback to make.
Yeah, you can tell the Alabama players, they have plenty of respect for this Indiana football team. There's no chance that they are taking anything for granted. They understand the underdog, but like I said, too, I think they got a chip on their shoulder. I think that could serve them well. All right, let's get to basketball. Alabama men defeated Yale last night, 102-78, without the best player on the team, LeBaron Philon. He sat this one out with a leg injury. In fact, Alabama only dressed 9 scholarship players. That's been the weird thing about this team. They never have a full roster available. But Aiden Holloway took advantage of Philon being out. He went for 26 points, 7 assists, had no turnovers. Amari Allen continued his SEC Freshman of the Year campaign with 15 points and 9 rebounds. Alabama made 22 threes, 22 of 54. They only turned it over 5 times. And how about this? They won the rebounding battle, 46-38, including 21 offensive rebounds. That's something that Nate Oates has been preaching on. They were up big at half. It was basically over at half. They were up 24 at half. That's what they wound up winning by. 102-78. They won by 24, but Alabama impressive. But it's going to get ratcheted up. They're 10-3 with wins over St. John's, Illinois, Maryland, and UNLV and Clemson as well. But they get Kentucky Saturday morning at 11 a.m. inside Coleman Coliseum in the SEC opener. Conference play is here. Well, still to come on TITV, see which former Alabama stars stood out in Week 17 of the NFL season. Bama in the NFL coming up next. And Rodney will rejoin me for your phone calls, emails, and tweets. As always, that phone number, 205-348-9882. We want to hear from you, Tighter Insider Nation. Next. Week 17 of Bama in the NFL. Derrick Henry put on a show Saturday night in Green Bay against the Packers. 216 yards, career-high 36 carries, 4 touchdowns as the Ravens kept their season alive with a 41-24 win over the Packers. They will now play Pittsburgh in the Steel City this Sunday with the AFC North Division title at stake. And Henry was just an absolute machine. Give him the ball. In Buffalo, the Eagles hung on. They didn't do a lot in the second half, nothing on offense, but this touchdown pass from Jalen Hurts to Dallas Goedert was the only touchdown the Eagles needed as they beat the Bills 13-12. And in Charlotte, Carolina Panthers quarterback Bryce Young would run it in here, keep it for 6, but the Panthers came up short against the Seahawks still, though. If they beat Tampa Bay on Sunday in Tampa, if they beat the Bucs, they will be the NFC South Division champions and headed to the playoffs. All right, we are back here on Tighter Insider TV. I'm Gary Harris. Rodney Orr is with us on the phone. And we're going to get to our Decades Pub and Grub hotline in just a moment, but right now let's go ahead and do our email question of the day, and it is brought to you by our good friends at KDM Service Corporation. When it comes to heating and air conditioning, serving your family like our family. Who do you guys think is the X factor for Alabama? That's from Byron down in Greensboro. And Byron, I tell you what, I still say it's Ryan Williams. I thought that against Oklahoma. It didn't happen. But he's just got too much talent. I think they've got to get involved in the offense, get the ball in his hands. Rodney, even if it means, a direct handoff through a speed sweep or a screen pass or something, maybe getting involved early, see if he can get in a rhythm, because I really think when he gets the ball in his hands, he's tough for any defender to get on the ground.
No, I think that's a great point. I mean, I think a lot of people would like to see Ryan kind of reemerge, and this would be a great opportunity for that. Gary, if I was picking a guy, I think I might go Yonze Pierre, because I think his ability to rush the passer, create some havoc, maybe do some things like he did against Tennessee when he had those 3 sacks on Aguilar, created a lot of havoc. Maybe he could make life a little miserable for Mendoza.
All right, folks in the control room, I'm wondering, because if we've got Roddy on the phone, if that's busying out the phone lines, because I have not been. Okay, we'll check it in the break. But phone lines, I'm told, are open at 205-348-9882. So go ahead and give us a call on the Decades Pub and Grub hotline. All right, let's get to an email question. Another one, and this is from Melody in Vestavia Hills. Is Nick Sheridan coaching in the Rose Bowl? Yes, he is. He is going to be going to Michigan as the offensive coordinator when the season's over. But my understanding, Rodney, is he'll be with the Crimson Tide as long as they're still playing, right?
That's my understanding. I think that Sheridan, said all along that, hey, he was going to coach this thing through before he goes to Michigan State and, becomes their new offensive coordinator, and I think that's the plan now.
All right, 205-348-9882. We don't ever get through a show without a phone call. Give us a call. Let's hear from you. We're going to come back with more, including Alabama women's basketball, undefeated in the pre-conference schedule, but now they're ready to open it up against number 3 South Carolina. And again, that phone number, 205-348-9882. We want to hear from you, Tighter Insider Nation. We'll be right back. All right, Alabama women's basketball cruised through the non-conference schedule, 14-0, best start in program history, but now it gets real. On New Year's Day, they'll be in Columbia to take on number 3 South Carolina in the SEC opener, and we're going to find out a lot about the Tide on New Year's Day. All right, welcome back in. We do have a phone call, and we're going to go to Luke over in Clay County. Hey, Luke, how are you?
I'm good, brother. How you doing?
Doing well. What you got for us, man?
Hey, will Alabama make a push for Cam Coleman or Malcolm Simmons from Auburn since they're in the transfer portal?
Good question. Rodney, what do you know about the 2 great Auburn receivers that are going into the portal? Any chance that one of them or both of them wind up at Alabama?
Well, I think Alabama would certainly has interest. I know that if you're talking about Cam Coleman specifically, then yeah, I think Alabama certainly has a lot of interest in Cam Coleman. Now, where he ends up remains to be seen. Malcolm Simmons, again, I would think they certainly would have interest in him too. Now, I don't see them taking both of those guys or probably not 2 receivers, but those guys are certainly, you'd certainly have interest in them.
All right, thanks for that phone call. And I know for a fact we got people down in Auburn watching us tonight. How about that, watching TITV? All right, we're going to come back with our score predictions next. Welcome back. A reminder that all of our phone calls are courtesy of the Decades Pub and Grub hotline. Decades Pub and Grub, scratch-made food right here downtown Tuscaloosa at Timerson Square. All right, it's prediction time. As always, we're going to start it off with you, Rod. Who you got?
Yeah, but, when I look at Indiana, they're just such a well-coached, sound, disciplined football team. They're 13-0 for a reason. They do all the right things. But, Gary, I think when we watched Alabama against Oklahoma, what we saw in that comeback was pretty significant. I think it carries over into this game. I think this team is ready for this game. I think, as you said earlier, they're going to play up to this underdog role as somewhat of a disrespect. So I'm going to go with Alabama in a close one here, 27-23.
I like your thinking. I'm on a pretty good roll. I picked Alabama in the Iron Bowl. They won. I picked Georgia in the SEC Championship game. Bama lost. I picked Alabama at Oklahoma, and they won. I'm with you. In fact, I'm going to say that Connor Talty kicks a game-winning field goal as time expires. Alabama wins at 24-22. How about that? All right, thank you.
Talty's the X factor then,
yeah,
huh?
maybe so. He would be if he wins the game. That's going to do it for Tider Insider TV. Thank you, Rodney. And don't forget, if you missed any of the show, you can catch a replay tonight at 10:30 or find it anytime online at WVUA23.com. We're going to leave you with photos of Alabama football's arrival in Pasadena last night. Good night, everyone.